Welcome to this latest episode of Japan's top business interviews. I'm your host, Dr. Greg Story, president of Dale Carnegie Tokyo Training. My special guest today is Bernard Delmas, who is the lead independent director for the Nissan Motor Corporation here in Tokyo and has had a long and glorious career in different companies here in Japan. So, Bernard, welcome. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you, Greg, for welcoming.
Yeah. So, Bernard, give us the backstory. I mean, you're a lead independent director for Nissan. You're not running Nissan, but you're playing an important role there. But we're going to talk about companies you've been running in Japan in the past. But let's talk about how did you get to Japan to be running companies here? Give us the backstory a little bit.
Okay, so yes, it's a long story. I have dedicated my almost entire career to a very famous company called Michelin. Michelin tires, very famous for tires all over the world, but also for something we'll talk later, I believe, is the Michelin Guide as well. So I'm born in south of France. I have still an accent. You can catch up maybe a bit. I have been through the classic engineering and business administration, I would say education. Then in Paris, when I was young, I was dreaming to travel. For many reasons, but I chose during my studies to go to Brazil. So I have spent actually very early days of my life to live 1 year in Brazil. Then I came back. I finished my graduation in the MBA in Paris, in HEC, very famous business school. And then I entered Michelin because I liked to work in an international company, but also in automotive. The reason probably is because my grandfather was an early pioneer in the car industry in France, working very young in Renault, establishing a dealership in south of France for selling and repairing Renault cars and so on. And my father was enthusiastic to car racing, so he loved cars. And very young, I was looking at F1 race. People doesn't exist anymore. Those famous like Jacques Brabham, all those very famous pilots. I saw them when I was a small boy.
Wow, okay.
So that was the reason I picked Michelin, because Michelin was very, I would say, international already. And obviously in Europe, but in North America and in Brazil as well. It was starting to really invest in Brazil at that time, not so much in Asia at that time. But I entered Michelin. I start by doing engineering training, understanding the technology of tires in Clermont-Ferrand, where Michelin has its headquarters in the middle of France. So a very international company, but also very local in France, a bit like Toyota.
In Nagoya.
In a way.
Toyota City, yeah.
Yeah, in Toyota City.
City.
You can make this comparison a bit. So I worked there 6 years in different training and also some operational position. And then I was, this is not my will, people knew that I want to work in overseas, internationally, in an international position, and they proposed to me to go to Japan.
Wow.
Oh,
I bet Japan was completely out of your mind as a destination.
Completely out of my mind. It's a kind of fatality, because when I was a very young boy in my hometown in south of France, Albi, we had two famous people. One, probably maybe the auditors knows about, is the first one was Gallo de la Pérouse, born in Albi, in my hometown. And he made like James Cook. He made the world tour at the end of the 18th century.
Right.
And he went through the Sakhalin and Hokkaido, Detroit, and
mapping the islands.
yeah, and if you look at the in the Japanese maps, it's called Soya Strait. In the international map, it's called La Pérouse Strait.
And there's a La Pérouse in Sydney.
In Sydney, right?
Named after him.
Yeah, they went through that, but the end of the story is not so nice because they were the two boats, very sailing boats. They were destroyed. They sank in the Solomon Islands because they were taken by a huge typhoon, and the story ends up.
That's the end of La Pérouse.
But they still, all the remainings, are in my hometown, and I was fascinated by that. That gave me the passion of traveling, and the second one is another very famous also person is Toulouse-Lautrec, painter.
Toulouse-Lautrec.
Toulouse-Lautrec was born in Albi. He has not an international experience, but he was influenced a lot by the Japanese ukiyo-e painters.
Yes.
And he signed, if you look at the Toulouse-Lautrec paintings, and a very young boy, I was in Albi, there is a museum. He signed with TL in a circle, red, like a Hanko. That was
I never noticed that before.
Very interesting. And my mother was was talented for painting. She was very interesting and brought me oftenly to this museum. And I was asking a young boy, what means this TL?
What is it?
And she explained me that.
She explained it to you.
So
she knew.
I had not zero understanding of Japan, but close to zero.
Well, it's interesting too. Last year, we went to Giverny outside of Paris to Monet's house.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've been there. The whole house is full of Japanese paintings. They've kept it from when he was alive. And this is the second time to go there. The first time I went there, it's an old wooden house, big wooden house, and you walk in. I couldn't believe it. Every wall, every space, Japanese hanga, Japanese prints. Yeah. Oh, amazing! So the influence of Japanese perspective on the French modern art is very, very strong. So a very good connection there with Japan.
Yeah. So basically, my understanding of Japan was very close to zero, except those two. Let's say early experience. I did judo in my life as well as a sport, so I understood judo and some wording, but except that, nothing. So I was sent to Japan, and my first job in Japan was basically at the time Michelin was starting to really be serious with the Asian market and Japanese market. And in 1985, that was the time I came first in Japan.
That's nearly 40 years ago.
Yeah.
Wow.
On the Asian map, if you think a country for economy is Japan.
Yes.
It's a time you have Ezra Vogel talking about Japan as a number one, challenging America and so on. And obviously for a company like Michelin, which has been developing from Europe, then a lot in Americas, the next step was Asia. And I was sent basically to understand the market. And in Japan more specifically, because our company, Michelin, have found really the importance of Japanese car makers. At that time, you had already the Toyota, the Nissan, the Honda, and others starting to export a lot, and even having already some plants overseas in America, in UK, but not so developed at that time. So my mission was really to investigate those markets, understand what are the requirements of the customers, end users, and as well the car makers, focusing on Japan a lot, but also looking at Korea, because we had at that time we have the first inroads in the international market of a very now famous company which is called Hyundai. And in '85 I went to Korea very, very soon to meet the people at Hyundai, but obviously the main was Japan.
And Hyundai would have been quite small then, globally, right?
At that time, I believe there was only one plant in the south of Korea, in Ulsan, with building, let's say, 200,000 cars a year.
Not much. In car
and
terms,
supported
really,
by Mitsubishi Motors. The engine were coming from Mitsubishi Motors, so it was very limited at the time. But I started work with them for their vehicle exported to, I believe at that time it was Canada. But anyway, so my first steps was in a company called Nihon Michelin tire, which was already established a few years ago. I think the company was established in 79, and it was actually originally the Michelin tires been imported in Japan in the 30s, but through importers. And Michelin decided in end of the 70s to establish its own company in Japan.
Go direct.
And direct. And because of the car makers, especially, we wanted really to address directly, have the understanding and negotiate with them directly. So that was the aim. And I was in charge of from Japan, for Japan first, but for the rest of Asia and Korea, then Thailand, Southeast Asia, to meet the customers, understand the needs, and start to develop. We were not talking too much at that time about marketing, but actually it was a kind of marketing surveys and technical understanding of.
Did you have a team supporting you, or were you doing this as a sort of independent element?
Actually, there was a small team there. My first probably decision was supported by the headquarters to develop the team.
Okay.
And to develop the team in Japan firstly, but also to have people in the major countries, like, again, Korea, but also Southeast Asia. Because at that time, very quickly, we found that the Japanese car makers were settling in Southeast Asia, especially in Thailand, but not only Thailand, in Philippines, in several countries. So we had to be there as well. It corresponds also, and that was a very important step for Michelin development in Asia. Michelin is a company who has been developing by internal growth, organic growth, basically, in Europe, in North America, in Brazil. But considering the speed of the market at that time, we are in the 80s, it's amazing. China is not yet open.
No.
It's going to open soon, but it's not yet open. You look at Japan, it's amazing, the growth which has been so far there. Then Southeast Asia and Korea, you need to go fast. And the company, that was a big strategic move made by the company.
But this is your initiative. You said to the company, hey, we should move fast, should expand. Let's get into Southeast Asia. Let's have a presence in Korea. Your observation.
Yeah, exactly.
Is what led to
it's not my decision at that time, but I brought a lot of input to the decision people in the.
I hope to have a statue to you somewhere in the Michelin headquarters in France. For all the foresight you had to see the future.
So no, basically I wrote that in a book. I described all my starting career.
Well, tell the audience what your book is called.
It's in French. It's called Au futur sans fin.
Au futur sans fin.
Endless future.
Endless future.
Is a message, the title itself. But actually, it's my experience.
And you have the Michelin man pulling the
lady in a jirikisha. So this mobility is about a lot of things, and obviously focusing.
And you published this last year?
It was published last year, yes, in France, and as this date is only in French. But some interviews has been made based on this book in the Nikkei.
We can find it in English.
We can find English and even Japanese. Let's say.
But we're waiting for you to get this into English, so the global English-speaking market can share in your adventures.
But this inroads in the Japan and Asian markets has been obviously very, for me and for the company, instrumental, because we discover all the markets, the needs, the speed of the evolution of the economy and the market, but also, and this is very important, the fact that obviously the management rules are not the same.
So talk a bit about that. What is different?
Yeah, because we obviously, firstly, you have many things which are different in Asia, starting by Japan. The language, you need to adjust. If you dream to work in English in those countries, whatever, no way. That is basic. But then, there are also many in the daily working life. There are many things you need to understand in the way the people are really working all together. Typically, if you give some example, in Japan, the typical nemawashi practice, which still existing.
And for our audience, nemawashi is type of groundwork where prior to the real meeting, you're having a lot of informal meetings with key people, trying to get them to come on board with your idea. So by the time you get to the meeting, it's a rubber stamp. We will have already agreed. We just formalize the agreement in the meeting, as opposed to the Western model. And I'm sure France is the same, where we'd get into the meeting.
Exactly.
We have a big debate.
Yeah.
We'd struggle.
Yeah.
We come to a conclusion. Next item. We move on, right?
Excellent description. So, but when you are young, when you have been, let's say, educated by the typical French or Occidental way, very, let's say, I would say, proud of what you are and about your knowledge, your way of thinking. The first experience are quite, I would say, in a way, disappointing. On top of that, you don't master the language, and I would not say you go in trouble, but in a way you go in trouble because you don't see anything happening.
Yeah, exactly. No, we made a decision. Where's the execution piece? Nothing's happened. What's going on here?
So, and if you dig a bit, you understand the people start especially in Japan, very nicely to tell you, maybe you should take the problem in a different manner, in a different way. So I will say that I go through all those experiences. But if you go in Korea, it's a bit different. Seniority is so important there. And it's more top-down. So I can describe other countries in Asia as well, because I went to all those countries and starting to grasp all those difference that you cannot catch up in a 1 week trip in the country. You need really. So I spend a lot of time talking with the people, the customers, our own people, the suppliers, and so on. And I make my, I would say, second important education part of my career life by doing that. And the company was very happy was doing that, because they didn't have many people yet, foreign international people able to catch up.
And particularly international people who can work in Asia.
Yeah.
Because international often means, well, they're going to work in Germany, or they're going to Denmark or something, or maybe America. Yeah. But not Korea or Japan, or China came later, but, Thailand or Indonesia, etc. That's quite like a very foreign world, I imagine.
So
headquarters.
One of the big decisions taken by the company, but obviously what I described earlier, influenced it a lot, was to go through a very new way of developing the business, was to do joint ventures. And we did... in 87, 88, 89, in this period, end of the 80s, we did 3 major joint ventures, one in Japan, one in Korea, and one in Thailand.
Right.
With partners already in the Thai industry, but not the number one, number two, the minor, or let's say, yes, minor Thai makers, which was already existing in those markets. The story in the 3 countries are completely different to each other. I will be short here. The Japan venture was a success. We joint venture with Okamoto, who was managing a brand called Riken at the time, and we developed well. We had a factory there. We developed the retail sales network, and obviously we continue to develop all the business, what we call OEM business, the business with the car manufacturers.
Engine manufacturers.
So we did the same in Korea. The Korea venture was it was not a success at the end. We fail, and we learn a lot. I can explain why we fail and what was the learnings as well. And then we had a third one in Thailand with a company, very famous company there, who tie up with a lot of international company called Siam Cement, which are very large conglomerate.
Big conglomerate.
Yeah.
Typical Southeast Asian big conglomerate, got a finger in every pie.
Yeah, and it worked very well as well. It's probably the one who has been the most successful of the three.
So did you go, at what point did you start leading Michelin in Japan? Because did you go back to France, or did you stay right through in Japan? How did that sequence work?
Okay, so my first period in Japan and in Asia, by the way, was from 85 to 91, the six years. At that time, I was not really leading the company. I was more the advanced marketer, understanding the market, but also having the mission to develop all the technical infrastructure for Michelin in Asia from Japan to support those joint ventures, but also all the car makers' necessary development and developing the teams to support that. So which was quite when you start from zero, it's like a big. And
was that difficult? Because Japan still have their own independent car manufacturers and different tire manufacturers. You have lots of other foreign competitors also supplying tires into Japan. So at that time, was it relatively easy to recruit Japanese to come and work for Michelin? Because often in Japan, as you know, the person is involved, the wife is involved, his parents are involved, her parents are involved, the grandparents get involved. There's a lot of decision makers around joining a foreign company. It's not just an easy, we'll just join a foreign company. No, you should join a Japanese company. Why are you joining a foreign company? So were you able to get people to come on board?
This is an excellent, very, very interesting question. That probably one question we have been a bit struggling at the beginning, trying to do what typically the Japanese company are doing, that to go to the universities and hire, let's say, the graduates, young graduates. We did that later. But at the very beginning, it was very difficult because when you get the young graduates, actually they don't know how to work. They need to be trained a lot. This is what the big companies in Japan are doing. But we were not yet organized to do that. So we quickly stopped that and tried to hire already experienced, let's say 3-5 years maximum, experienced people, and usually having an experience already in an international company, either Japanese or international in Japan. And that was quite successful because we could...
if they've already worked for a foreign multinational, joining Michelin is not a big jump. And I'm guessing that there would be enough of those people around for what you needed, that you could access them.
At that time, I think we found quite easily people like this. It was quite easy. And then when we have set up the minimum infrastructure, we shift to the more classic hiring and training process that we see in Japan, where the people are really trained, on-job training. When they enter the company, we take a lot of time and care about the people. Sometimes one mistake we did as well is we thought it was very nice to send them overseas very quickly, the young people. That didn't work so well. It was much better to have them...
22, 23 years of age, probably never been overseas in their entire lives. Probably don't even have a passport.
Exactly. So we prefer to bring them, to have them here locally, to start to train them on job training here, and then the best of them to send them for further training overseas. And I can say that at the end, it worked very well this. But we had to really adapt the thinking. Yeah.
So you could access people, and then you worked out the training regime, so you could grow the numbers.
Yeah.
And then you said you were 6 years. What happens at the end of that 6 years? What do they do with you then?
I spent I could not. imagine the speed of time. No time to breathe. It was, we established the three venture. I was traveling a lot in Korea, in Thailand, Japan. Mazda is in Hiroshima. You have Toyota in Nagoya. We have Honda in Tsunomiya, etc. So I was traveling, meeting the people. It was a time I travel a lot. And
I hope you were single at this time, Bernard.
No,
it was very hard on relationship.
I met my spouse in Japan, a Japanese lady. Actually, she's on maybe on the in the
card there,
and no, it was very intense period of my career, and in 1991. Already we have established that a company, and I was lucky for that because I was really happy with this job. It was for me intense, but it was what I dream about. But company approached me. My boss said, "Okay, we're happy with what you are doing, but you need to go further in understanding the company, especially." About the technology, about you need to come back 3 years in France as headquarters in the R&D, in order that you catch all the knowledge, necessary knowledge, to be able to establish our future R&D in Japan.
Ah, okay.
Oh, so I talk with my spouse already and say, well, yes, it's a good idea. Let's go to France.
She's Japanese?
She's Japanese, yeah.
Wow,
and
that
we
must
went,
have been interesting for her.
It was, but it's not Paris, It's not, it's south, middle of France in Clermont-Ferrand.
Countryside?
It's a very nice place, by the way. It looks like a bit, I used to say that Auvergne region around Clermont-Ferrand is about like the Gouma,
okay.
mountains, lakes, and still close to Tokyo.
Yep.
Very nice place to live. So my spouse was enthusiastic. So we went there. I spent 3 years to just grasp all the knowledge necessary. I was very, I would say, supported by the top management because actually the target was to send me back and to establish the R&D. So all the people knowing that, they were very enthusiastic to support me. I was let's say 3 years again to learn more, and also obviously I had some task to do there. And I moved back to Japan in early 95.
This is the bubble economy, right? When you came back,
yes,
things are going crazy here, right?
Yes.
Plaza Accord in 95, the yen becomes unbelievably strong.
Exactly.
Japanese are taking over everything. Everyone thinks anyway.
But you describe the key elements of the economic transformation which happened in Japan at that time. And it has major consequences for us. The first is the Japanese car maker, already exporting a lot of cars, suddenly established the famous transplants. They could not afford anymore the yen and Dhaka. The yen very high. They had to, because they have conquest already a lot of market, North America, even in Europe and so on. So they had to establish the factories there. So one of the big challenge I had, consequences of this new economic situation, was to work with all our overseas colleagues to support the business, not only in Asia, in Japan especially, but in North America, in Europe, because all the technical work at that time was still done in Japan.
Oh, really?
Same, by the way, a bit later with Hyundai in Korea, they went so fast, so feed. They established a factory in Canada, and same, they start to build, and they want Michelin tires. For the vehicle made there, they had not really yet the habit to work with international suppliers. So they were very happy to have a company like Michelin, which they knew already, to say, okay, we are going to support you over there. So the top management here was very happy to have all these opportunities. So I took the lead here. I become the head of this original equipment division.
That's after you came back to Japan.
Yes.
So you become back as the president or MD of Japan,
I-
and doing all this other stuff as well at the same time.
Exactly.
Wow, that must be busy.
And they asked me to do that for Asia because we had the Korea to do so. We have to continue to work with Southeast Asia because Southeast Asia was also doing, and China.
Well, here's a question, I mean, you're only one man, Bernard. I know you're a hard worker, but, for anyone to come to Japan, you had 6 years here, break of 3 years, you come back, now you're the head, you've got to run the Japan operation. That in itself, usually for most people, is more than enough. But you're also, plus, taking on this other role as well. So did that make it difficult to run the Japan operation, did you find? Because you're trading off time, you have limited time. How did you balance that?
I think my answer is simple. You have to forget to do by yourself. Let's say my first period, I did a lot. I had building the team. I did a lot of things by myself, and it's over that. There are many things, simple things, not many things, simple things to think. First, you need to have a team. The team has to be developed and strengthened. And in Japan, but also overseas, you need also these teams to work all together. So the communication between the teams is absolutely essential.
Well, how did you do that? Because I interviewed one of my previous guests, and the company he was in, they had 3,000 people globally, and every year they would bring them to the headquarters, all 3,000 people to the headquarters for a week. Wow, that's Jonathan Epstein's interview actually with Adiel, and you think about that, that's crazy. But from another viewpoint, if you think about coordination, communication, human relations, trust, creativity, I mean, they obviously thought the investment was worthwhile, but I thought, wow, that's really serious to get people to work together. So how did you guys approach it?
But first you have language question. You need to have a common language, and obviously you need to make sure that the people work in English. At that time, it was not so easy in Japan, but we make sure that we establish regular English training for all our people. The same in all other countries, and maybe to really and Asian people and Japanese people loves to do that. That was an initiative I take very early, is to organize not big meetings at the headquarters once a year, but regular meetings with all the people in Asia. And that obliges us to travel a bit, but rotating between the country.
So each country hosts a meeting.
Yeah, the meeting. And we did as much as we can, sharing our experience. Obviously, when you had the Japanese makers like Toyota, Honda in Thailand, our colleagues in Thailand was very happy to meet with their Japanese colleague, and it fostered very quickly informal relationship that the people were very happy to have, and including to show to the customer. And it became very quickly a strength for Michelin compared to other Thai companies to be able to work as a one team, global team. Being able,
that's something, because that's not such an easy thing to achieve.
But we thought it was very essential, especially with the car makers, to be able for a company like Toyota, Honda, Hyundai, when they come to us, they have a single voice, which is actually a voice coming from many locations, but very quickly, same voice.
That's something.
And it was critical. And actually, I will tell you, I will not give you the name, but for some companies, they could not themselves, our customer, to have the same.
Internally, they couldn't do it.
So it was becoming a strength.
It's interesting, though, because usually the experience with Japan, and I talk about Japan in this case, because Japan loves to have their castle with a deep moat right around the castle, keep everybody else out. and this is Japan. We're going to do it our way, and everyone else just back off, and we'll leave it us to it. We'll fix it. So to get the Japanese organization to integrate with the global organization, if you could achieve that, that's really something, because often it doesn't work well.
Remember what we start with this second period. You say there was a bubble, the yen and the car, and all the Japan car industry was, I would not say force, but there is this big move of settling the famous so-called transplant all over the world. So it was a time of internationalization, globalization, I would say, for the Japan car industry. So far, they have been, like you describe a bit, like the castle, sending troops overseas, but coming back to the castle.
Yes.
Now they start to have
multiple castles.
Multiple castles to manage in America, in Europe, in Southeast Asia, very soon in China as well. So for them, it was also an opening challenge. They understood very quickly. And having a company, actually, they were looking for big suppliers like us, which are able to support them globally, but also give them some, let's say, support, understanding, even advice how to do that. Because they were doing themselves. They are facing the same challenge. I remember, I'm lead independent director at Nissan now, but I work a lot with other Japanese companies like Honda and Toyota. I remember in '98, we have been invited by Toyota. At the time, there was Nagano Olympics. It was a time that Toyota was settling the Valenciennes factory, the French factory, which became huge later. And actually, they immediately called us and they asked me, if possible, to bring our former president, Mr. François Michelin, to be at the Nagano Olympics. They invited him 3 days. We had top meetings with Mr. Toyoda and himself. And actually, I tried to understand why they were doing that to a supplier. And actually, the intention was really to demonstrate to all their teams that they had to cooperate with a company like us, which are global, because Toyota was becoming also, it was a time Toyota should become global as well. Just in the next months, they gave us the first global supplier award they created for recognizing the global supplier.
If you want to be successful as a leader, do the Leadership Training for Managers course. All companies need people who can both manage and lead. Leading people screams out for real skills in communication, dealing with all different types of people, being excellent at innovation, planning, delegation, handling mistakes, doing performance reviews really well, and inspiring and motivating the team. Do the Leadership Training for Managers course now in either Japanese or English. Are you doing business with Japan? Do you really know how things work? Japan Business Mastery provides the answers. Do you have the right networks and know how to create them? Do you know how to get on the same wavelength with Japanese buyers? Do you know what being trustworthy looks like from the Japanese perspective? Japan Business Mastery is based on more than 30 years' experience in Japan and will become your go-to guide. Want to succeed in Japan? Buy Japan Business Mastery now. Isn't that interesting? Now, if we flip it around,
please,
would Michelin, as a French company, have thought to invite some of their business connections to some similar event in France to create that same idea? It's interesting that Toyota did that. You see their strategy. I'm just thinking, would we think about doing that? Probably we wouldn't think about doing that. We wouldn't have that vision, maybe.
It's a very interesting question. I think Michelin as a tradition, we did a lot of inviting, let's say, customers and to try to understand better what is Michelin as a company, the culture. Michelin is a very long historic company with values, very strong values, and the way of thinking about the management and so on. So we try to share a lot. But honestly, what did Toyota at that time was absolutely impressive in my view, because they really wanted even to influence their own people. I believe
That's interesting.
to try really to change the mindset, because this company was going they had to go very quickly to the globalization, and they succeed, because one of the strengths of the Japanese corporation, we call that monozukuri. This
manufacturing, creating things.
Technical and industrial capability.
Maker mentality. Yeah.
And they had, obviously, my understanding that in the 80s, 90s, that was really, for the car industry, they had this impressive monozukuri strength in Japan. But now, when they have to transplant it, when just you export the vehicle from Japan to US or to Canada or to wherever, you send the salespeople, the marketing people, and that's all. But when you establish the manufacturing, you have to export, you have to transplant also the monozukuri mentality system, which includes technical people, engineering, manufacturing, suppliers as well. So it's an entire system which has to be transplanted, and they have to do this challenge. They succeed. So for me, in the 90s, the big success of Japanese has been to able to execute this transplant, especially in North America, in Europe, in the rest of the world later, but especially to export and transplant their monozukuri system.
So what about within Michelin? Now, I asked you before about, you're basically taking Michelin global, you're unifying Michelin globally, in addition to your day job, which is running Michelin in Japan. So it sounds like you must have done a lot of delegation to your senior Japanese team to allow you the time. So for most leaders, they're often guilty of not delegating. They're very concerned about control. They're very concerned about if things go wrong, it's going to come back on them, so they better micromanage it, or they don't want to let go of the control. So how did you manage yourself to say, okay, I'm globalizing Michelin here, that's a big job. I'm running Japan, that's a big job. I can't do both jobs. I've got to have a balance. So I'm going to need to push out a lot of the Japan operation to my senior people and let them run it. How did you make that jump? Because it's not such a simple jump. How did you do that?
I think you need, and this is probably a Michelin value, to develop the trust with the people. And trust is not one way, it's both way. The people have to be confident to work with the managers, the top managers. And the top management has to trust also what the people are doing. If you are not trusting each other, you cannot do anything.
How do you build the trust?
How do you build the trust? I think you need to accept some level of risk. You need to accept the risk that the things are not done like you like to see them done. And actually, you need to forget a bit this idea that you're thinking how the thing has to be done is the way it should be done.
Is the only way, right?
It's the only way.
So there's many ways to the mountaintop.
Exactly.
You get to the same point, but a different route. But when you're the leader, you think, well, this is the route.
Yeah.
What's wrong with you? You've got to go this way.
You have to stop this thinking.
Yeah.
The second thing is probably you need to... What people, and it's true for all over the world, but it's very true in Japan, probably the country where it's the most important to be done, to answer this question, is to set up priorities. I remember one of my mentor at Michelin, the one who sent me to Japan in the early days, coming many years later and reminding my early days in Michelin, saying, Bernard, don't forget, you are not in France, in Clermont-Ferrand. You need to choose, to make priorities. You cannot do everything. That helped me a lot. That helped me a lot. And if you do priorities, you can focus much more, and your teams can focus. And you can say to the team, and this is your duty. okay, this is maybe nice to do, but this is not our priority. I am the boss. I can say that. Now, what you are going to focus, you should tell me how to do it. And I need your support and engagement on this priority. But this, is not. We'll think
get
that
to it later.
We'll think that. I think that also is very, very important. I think.
But how do you? We talk about trust, right? For example, trust is a human condition, right?
Yeah.
So you're a busy CEO. You're globalizing Michelin around the world. You're running Japan. You're delegating. Maybe some of those people knew you from when you were there previously in a different role. Now you're their boss. So you have to build a trust as the boss. How did you build a trust with people individually?
First, you need to spend time. Communication.
Well, this is my point. Where's the time?
But
because you're running the world.
Time is probably the most key resources you have for
Absolutely,
yourself and for your teams. So you need to really accept that time is a very important resource, which give me very quickly the idea that, and this is not easy in a global company, including Michelin, you need to be patient. If you start to be in a hurry, quick, and you can be commanded to go quick, to go fast, because the customer asks you to go fast, your management go fast, but you need to manage this, because, okay, especially in Japan, it takes time. And
you can never accuse Japan of going too fast, can you? This never happens here.
Yeah, and that patience is a way to build trust. Another way to build trust is when you have some crisis or some problems, issues. If you start to claim the people, if you start to just put pressure on the people, putting pressure is okay. But you need really, again, it's linked to patience as well. You need to really take the time to understand why the problem occurs. And I have a say myself, with a lot of experience, including with the customers, is that you build trust through mistakes, through the problem solving. I have experience, by example, with again, big company like Toyota, Nissan, and as well, where the trust between Michelin and those companies finally happen after resolving crisis. But actually, it's the same in management.
And I guess the point there is when something doesn't happen in either the time or the cost or the quality that it's supposed to happen, the Japanese buyer, they really judge how you respond. Are you, no, it's not our problem, it's not our fault, you didn't do something or other. This is a very typical Western approach, as opposed, it's a legalistic approach. We don't have any legal damage here, right? As opposed to, oh, okay, we see the issue, we'll fix it. And they see that you take it seriously. They see that you have a joint responsibility. You want to help them as the client, and you will commit the resources and fix it. And then they realize, we can trust these people. When things are going good, hard to know if you can trust people or not. When things are going bad and they help you out in a crisis, that guy, Mr. Delmas, reliable guy, we can trust him.
I fully agree, and you make a very nice summary. Actually, I will say that probably I learned a lot from the car maker and the customer experience, translating it to my own management in the teams was very helpful. And it worked.
How did you translate that into your own teams? What did you do?
Again, the question of, I would say, not starting to judge too quickly what is the issue, be patient, trying to understand the root cause of the problem, trying to help the people in a way to resolve the problem, rather than just, again, pointing out, claiming, and asking for quick resolution. I think when the people see that you support them to resolve the issues they are facing, they trust you.
It's interesting, you made a comment before that the joint venture in Korea, unlike the one in Japan, unlike the one in Thailand, wasn't successful, and you said, we learnt a lot. So do you think that experience helped you to understand the value of overcoming problems, overcoming things that don't work out well? Because there's a learning element to that it makes you stronger and better. And if you have that mentality and someone makes a mistake or there's an error, you see it as we don't fire that person, we help that person, we support that person, we don't scold that person. It's a bit like Ichikoh. He's very famous that they had some new marketing campaign they did for a particular car, completely failed. And the guy who was in charge of the marketing was called up to Leo Ichikoh's office. And the guy wrote, in his book that I thought I was going to get fired, of course, being typical America. And he said to Ichikoh, I suppose you're going to fire me. And Ichikoh said, fire you? We just spent $5 million educating you. Now, think about that. The senior guy in the whole company has that mentality. What do you think the result is all the way down to the bottom? Are people feeling more empowered? Are they feeling more comfortable? Are they feeling better able to take a risk? They feel that it's not going to be fatal? That sets a frame. So I'm just wondering for you inside the company in Japan, having had that experience in Korea the first time, whether your mental frame was such that you could give the people in Japan comfort too.
I think one reason we fail in Korea is because the intensity of you just described, training the people, talking to the people, being patient, have not been so developed in Korea. Maybe because it was our main base at that time was Japan. I would say with Southeast Asia, it was much easier because the development was slower there. And probably the culture, the people were ready to, and there are many, I cannot analyze completely why it was so easier in Southeast Asia, but it was the reason.
Well, I'm sure in Thailand, running around scolding people is not going to work there with their culture. They've got a very soft culture.
Yes,
so
I
you
agree.
come in with you made a mistake, you stupid person.
So probably
that's just not going to
so
work.
probably what the recipe working in Japan worked very well in Thailand. That was the reason. In Korea, it was quite different.
Korea's a bit different. They're a bit more, I don't know. They're different anyway. Put it that way. I'm sure with the hierarchical system, there's a lot of scolding and a lot of pressure from the top.
Exactly. It's probably. I have experience. I don't want to go too much in detail because it was sometimes it was tough. The experience in Korea of doing things with the customer which are not yet ready to the international business, starting to really trying to educate even the customer, doing things they don't know to do, or seeing also practice of management, which was, I would not say shocking, but so different to my own values, original values, or what I have done in Japan. So I think on the surface, it was things was more direct, but what we were doing in Japan or in Southeast Asia didn't work so well in Korea, and the people we had, our partners, was very willing to go fast as well. So the result didn't came so quickly. In an industrial cooperation, you cannot expect to have result overnight. So at the end, it become a misunderstanding between the partner and
blows up. So if you think about, you learned about how to stitch the global organization together. You learned how to delegate authority to your first line of division heads, I guess. What were some other lessons you learned about leading when you were in that position in president of Michelin in Japan?
Yeah, maybe we can go to the third stage, because I came back to France before answering your question. I went back in 2004 to France. Actually, the company, after a very long 9 years, so 6 years, 3 years in France, 9 years again in Asia. At the time, it was booming. I will not go in the Chinese part of my experience because it will be too long. Because
that's going to be a whole separate podcast.
Yeah, it's from 97 to 2004. I went in China also almost once a month.
Wow!
I open all the business for Michelin in all the Chinese factory which were starting to pop up there.
Yeah.
So I had a long experience in China as well. We can talk hours. And China was another world. And we didn't commit the same mistake than Korea, because the Chinese market was for our company an entire new challenge with a lot of, priority was put a lot there to make sure that we succeed. So I will not develop that part. And coming back, I went in 2004. The company asked me to come back in France and to head the R&D of Michelin.
Wow, R&D.
R&D.
For Michelin Global.
Yes.
Wow.
So I was very honored to that. And actually, the top of the company, the top was now the son of François Michelin, Edouard Michelin. The reason he picked me was, he said, you have this international experience in Asia, developing that. We need to open a bit more in Europe. So he come back to your an earlier question. He used me to develop the opening, for example, research, open research with labs and university, which was not done so much at that time. Develop further the relationship with the German car makers, the European car makers in general, which was not developed like we did in Asia. Also internally, to develop the good communication with the business unit and the R&D and so on. So he asked me to be the...
So Europe had its own version of their castles as well, I guess, if you think about it, right?
Exactly.
And you're going to break those castles apart and join them back together again.
So he asked me to be the catalyzer of this, let's say, internal communication, external communication center on the R&D, because opening the oyster, you know. So I did that 3 years. I was supposed to stay longer, but many things happened at that time. Our Edouard Michelin passed away in an accident. And then in Asia, in Japan, the head of Japan, also covering Korea and some other, passed away as well. So it was and I was asked to come back in Asia and to head up the region.
Oh, okay. Based in Tokyo?
Based in Tokyo. So, and we are in 2007. 2007 is just a year Michelin is starting, because our Mr. Edouard Michelin, before passing away, and the head of Japan at that time, decided to launch a Michelin Guide. So I inherited that when I arrived, to launch the Michelin Guide in Japan.
The Michelin Guide, yeah, of all the restaurants, right?
I didn't know at all this world, but I felt very quickly that was a huge opportunity to develop the brand.
The branding is incredible.
The branding is, and
particularly as now Japan has more restaurants Tokyo has more restaurants than Paris, more Michelin, 3-star restaurants than anywhere.
So it comes back to your question now, because I came back in Japan. I had this very long experience I developed with the car makers, opening the markets, etc., developing the team. And suddenly, I had the full responsibility now. I was heading. And I face also very new challenges. This Michelin Guide story was brand new for me and taking a lot of time. And the teams have not been yet really, we were just starting that. Second, we are very soon, 2007, 2008, Lehman shock. Catastrophe on the developing economies worldwide, including Japan. I had to restructure to stop the manufacturing in Japan, because our markets, we were exporting and to North America a lot. They dropped. We had many. So I had all those things to do. Now, when you are facing, I can sum all the new challenge I had to face. You have to really think even further delegation. So and really delegate at the point that you give the responsibility to people, not just you make sure that what you are doing under your responsibility works well, but you give responsibility to the people, and you make sure that they have the means, the resources, and you pick up the right people. That's probably the key. I mean, I spend a lot of time at that time to make sure that I will organize around me a team of managers. It was Japanese manager, but also people coming from overseas, America or France as well, that I tried to match to these new challenges, match their talents, and spend a lot of time to look at that. What type of team you would like to have to face, and what type of delegation of responsibility, what type of responsibility you need to delegate to those people in order to pick up the right people to put in front of that. And then to devote, to really concentrate your time in coordinating, communicating. I spend a lot of time in that period to communicate. The Michelin guide occupied me a lot on that. But also, when you go restructuring, you need to communicate a lot with employees, external as well. So I spent probably at that time, let's say, 40-50% of my time in communication, internal and external.
That's a huge amount.
And the rest was people management, managing my managers. And making sure that we have the right managers in the right position. I think that's what I was doing. So I had already to forget doing the things myself for sure, but even in the command and control, you know this famous film, Command and Control. You cannot work like this. It's good on a boat.
Yeah, theory.
But it doesn't work like this. You need
it's too messy. It's too messy.
Yeah. So you need really to delegate a lot, but make sure that the things happen. And if you are like, you need to again, this idea of defining very clearly to the team the direction with the priorities, making sure that you give them the resources necessary and let them do. And this requires already a lot of communication to make it happen properly. So that's my best answer.
Great answer. Thank you. Great answer. Now, Bernard, if someone called you up and said, hey, Bernard, I'm in Paris. I've just been given this big job. I'm going to come to Japan. I'm going to run an organization in Japan, but I don't speak Japanese. I don't know Japan. What advice have you got for me, Bernard, for me to be effective? What advice would you give them?
This is an interesting question. Why I'm saying that is because firstly, I've been asked many times on that. There is one famous person that has been asking me that.
This is in the book, right?
It is in the book.
So it's public information.
It's public information. It's Mr. Carlos Ghosn himself.
Carlos Ghosn, really? Okay,
because I can talk a bit about him. Carlos Ghosn was, I entered in Michelin with Carlos Ghosn exactly the same time.
Is that right?
I spent, in the early years, the 2-3 first years, we were young engineers starting at Michelin. We had plenty of free time. So I used to be, I am a bridge player. And we play a lot of bridge at a good level in tournaments and so on. So I knew very well his character when he was young. But our life, say, was he went to Brazil, he went to North America. He was the one to restructure Michelin North America after and to manage Michelin North America operation after we took over Uniroyal Goodrich there. There is a story. Sorry to
go for it.
In 1988, very interesting story. Is a time we talked earlier about globalization of the car industry. The same thing happened to the tire industry. In 1988, still Michelin is strong in Europe, has been developed quite well in North America, and we are starting to develop Asian market, as I described earlier. We have other companies in Europe like Continental, Pirelli, which are very European. In North America, we have Goodyear company, we have Uniroyal, Goodrich. Those two have been combining, and we have a fourth one, very famous as well, Firestone. And Firestone had been in big trouble. They had some quality issues, and they have been weaker financially. And in 1988, Bridgestone of Japan is very Japanese company, very strong in Japan, willing to become global, like Toyota. Like that. They decide, this is very impressive, to go in how do you say in English? OPA, purchase.
An M&A,
an M&A, but
buy out somebody.
Buy out, yeah. And not hostile, but on the open market, they went to buy, making an offer. Michelin was looking as well, because Michelin was established in North America, but not very strong yet, not big yet. So they were looking to the same. So Michelin, but because we had already settled our organization in US, the antitrust commanded that we could not take over all the company. So we decided to go with Pirelli. So we make a second bid over Bridgestone to take over Firestone with Pirelli, combined. This is public, also story. In the next day, Bridgestone came back with a third bid, which was twice the price.
Oh, wow.
The initial bid.
Wow.
And they got and finally took Firestone. So the Bridgestone and Firestone became altogether. It was a big step in the car industry. Few weeks later, Mr. Yeri, I met regularly through the JATMA, the Japanese Tire Association in Japan. We had regular meetings there, and he came to me and said, because of you, I'm now just eating pizza. So Japanese can have a very funny sense of humor. So and he was joking. It was a very that happened. 1 year later, Michelin took over Uniroyal Goodrich. So you have in 2 years, 88, 89, a huge transformation of the car industry. Goodyear stay and become the number 3, and Michelin and Bridgestone, one taking over Firestone, Uniroyal Goodrich, and the other one taking Firestone, become the number 1 and number 2. So you have a very quick consolidation of the tire industry. So that's an interesting part of my life, because obviously that was managed by the headquarters, but we were obviously looking and very careful on what also, and it transformed the entire way of doing business. Maybe the reason I was developing this story is because Carlos Ghosn. Carlos Ghosn was sent just after the takeover of Uniroyal Goodrich. He was sent to North America from Brazil to manage that and restructure that. So he did that very well, very quickly. He was very in restructuring this man as a talent, which is extraordinary. And later, he left Michelin because he realized, I think that's the main reason, he realized that he will not be able to become the number 1. Edouard Michelin became the number 1. So he left and went to Renault. So in 96, 1 year before Edouard Michelin passing away, he left to Renault. He restructured Renault in Europe. And in 1999, that year, Renault and Nissan actually become altogether.
Well, Renault basically bailed out Nissan, right, financially.
It's not a buyout. We took a
Well,
measure.
not buyout, I mean bailed them out,
yeah.
gave them a lot of money
Yeah.
and kept them going.
To create the famous so-called alliance. And Carlos Ghosn was sent to Japan. Immediately he called me because we knew each other.
Hey, Bernard.
I'm
coming to Japan.
How are you? I'm coming to Japan. I need your advice. And so we met in Paris. We met in Tokyo. He came, at that time, he came very quickly. And I had to explain him what is Japan because he didn't know at all. So I tried my best to explain him. He probably offered me to come to work with him, but I was very happy with my job. I declined that, but actually I spent a lot of time on this question with him. So I want just to.
So what did you tell him?
So what I tell him is obviously. First, we have to be careful here in answering because obviously the task he has to face and what my experience was quite different. Especially in '99, I had absolutely no restructuring experience. I had later. I did my restructuring experience in Japan following the Lehman shock in 2009, 10, 11. So it was much later. So my experience was more developing the international market. I will not repeat all we said earlier. So but I had, I think, an interesting experience to develop the teams in Japan. And for a foreign company perspective, establishing in Japan and developing the activity here and obviously in other Asian countries. So I try to pass on him this experience of how to develop a team and how to manage team in Japan. And again, I will not repeat all what I explained. Now, obviously, his question was, and his challenge was himself projected to the top immediately, having not the possibility to experience the field immediately. And I believe what I told him at that time is about patience. And he's not a man of patience.
I was going to say, I don't remember Carlos Ghosn having much patience with restructuring Nissan. He was very quick.
And obviously that was not really matching what he has in mind to do with Nissan. I think I tried also to talk a lot about the respect of people, taking the time to but I think he's, and maybe we can stop on this Carlos Ghosn advice because it was more a very specific case for him. He duplicate actually what he done earlier in North America when Michelin took over in Udrich, or what he did at Renault in Europe, and he did that, and I have no comment on what he did in Japan. He did what was necessary to be done.
We had a template, didn't he? He experienced these things. He said, well, Japan, great, but here's my template.
Exactly.
It's going to happen. I'm going to make it happen. And he made it happen.
And he did it.
He made it happen,
Probably, and this is probably not for today, it's for a second book.
Okay.
We'll talk about
sequel.
What happened later to Nissan and what happened recently to Nissan, which is more my current experience. But I will not talk about that today. I'm writing a second book on that.
Oh, very good.
But I will say that probably what he missed, because at the end of the story, you know what happened to him at the end. He probably failed to keep the grasp on what he did so well at the beginning. One reason he's become so occupied. Remember that he took over Renault. He became a Renault and Nissan. On top of that, he took over Mitsubishi. You had Astovaz in Russia. And I believe he was obliged to delegate. So, and I will not comment on that, but the second part of his experience at Nissan, delegating, being occupied worldwide, maybe works less than when not compared to the time we were really hands-on, the restructuring like he did.
Phase one.
Phase one, exactly.
Well, in the end, he was mainly in an aircraft traveling the world. I mean, he wasn't in Japan much. He was trying to keep the whole thing together. I mean, we don't need to go into what happened with Carlos Ghosn, but frankly, I was always a fan of Carlos Ghosn and what he did for restructuring Nissan, because the Japanese couldn't do it.
Yeah.
They absolutely could not do it internally. And he came in and he turned that company around and did a tremendous restructuring job. Now, maybe he should have departed and gone somewhere to America or something and made lots and lots of dough there. It would have been a happier
That's
story.
another story.
That's another story, but there we go. But it's fascinating that he called you and you could give him that advice.
Yeah.
He couldn't apply it perhaps because phasing was wrong for him.
And this is probably my best answer to your question. You need to be careful when you answer to this question to give too much detail because it depends on the context. But there are fundamental things to keep in mind when you do management in Japan. And again, you come back to what I tried to describe earlier, is being patient, respecting a lot of the people and the way they are doing. You are not going to force those people to do something they are not understanding. I mean, I'm not saying they don't want to do. They are not understanding. And the role of manager here has to be understand well what is happening, give us the top priorities, the direction, the objectives, make sure that the teams understand well what they have to do, make sure that the resources are well applied, and that there is not too much deviation to those objectives. Only you can change objectives, obviously, if something major happen, but your role is like this, and trust the team, build on the trust with the team. That will make the success. But after, obviously, restructuring like Carlos Ghosn did in Japan, or like I did 10 years later with our industrial operation in Japan, it's not the same than developing a new business.
No, it's different.
It's not. I mean, each challenge has its own paradigm, and I think it's difficult to give a recipe of that.
That's true. But Bernard, this podcast should be a 3-hour podcast because I feel you and I have only touched the surface of your adventures here in Japan. Looking forward to volume 2 of your book on your experiences in Japan. But what you shared today, and I didn't know about the Carlos Ghosn part. That's like a wonderful story as well. But thank you very much. It was fabulous.
Great. Thank you for keeping the time and giving nice questions.
Thank you. Please join us again for our next episode of Japan's top business interviews.